Welcome back. This week's tip is dealing specifically with time sequences in your speech. One of the things I watch speakers do quite often is they'll start telling a story and then they'll refer to an earlier time and then they'll flip back to a later time. And for me, what this does is it creates confusion in the mind of the audience. Wherever possible, try to start at the beginning on a time sequence. If maybe you were 8 years old and something happened, and then you roll forward and the main point in your story is you're 35 years old, but that 8-year-old experience is affecting you in your 35-year-old experience. And then you rolled on through life and you had some other things that happened later on. But try to put that time sequence in order. It's a lot easier for the audience to follow your speech if there's a linear time progression in it versus I'm 35, I'm 8, I'm 42, 23, I'm 53. You're going back and forth. Most speakers also are very poor at locating that time for the audience, so the audience knows when it was. Now, this is not a hard rule. If you did start a speech and you're telling a story about when you're 35 years old, make sure you have a clear transition if you want to go back to being 8. So you tell a story that you're getting fired, I don't know, when you're 35 years old and you're sitting there. And as you walked out, you remembered when you were 8 years old, this situation happened and it had a similar component. But really make a very clear transition to that 8-year-old time period. I think if you look at your speech, though, it's going to be a lot more impactful on the audience if you give the 8-year-old story first and then roll forward that this happened later. And that sequence, almost every time I've seen this with a speech, the earlier story plays into the later story very well if you tell it first and line it up. And it creates some mystery and tension for the audience as you start with this young experience. So the simplicity is, and this is just in any speech you're giving, try to keep that time sequence, that time, there's a line that goes through here. And try to keep that timeline moving progressively through your speech. Don't flip back and forth on it all over the place. And I've gone over this before, which is giving specifics so that you're not confusing your audience. If you are talking about getting fired from a job, tell them when it was. It was in 1998. Or it was when I was 24 years old, I got fired from my first job. I was working in Philadelphia. Give them the specifics so that the audience in their mind gets a clear picture of it. Don't just say on my first job, I got fired and I wasn't sure what I was going to do. Give them enough specifics that they can think with that. And that's where this timeline comes in. Because, and I've used this in an earlier example, if you gave the data when I was in school or when I was a child in school, that could be 6 years old, that could be 18 years old. It could be elementary school, it could be high school. Give the specifics of it and then keep that timeline sequence in as you go through your speech. And it's going to wind up with a lot clearer picture in the mind of your audience, which is what you want. Because let's remember that what communication is, it is not what you said, it is what they heard. And more specifically, it is what they duplicated you said. That is what it is. So every effort should be made when you're communicating, when you're speaking to an audience, to make sure the audience duplicates what you're saying, understands what you're saying, gets what you're saying, that it arrives at that audience and that audience's mind. And that's why I think this timeline is a very important point to keep in mind. Anyway, that's the tip for the day. It's a simple one. I think you'll get big dividends on it if you use it. See you next week.